This is Sutta number 27. This is very important sutta. In fact, one of the most important, because it gives what I call the main model or paradigm of the gradual path, complete path to liberation, according to the scheme of the middle-length discourses. And this sutta also has special importance in the history of Buddhism in Sri Lanka, because when Buddhism first came to Sri Lanka in the 3rd century BC, it was brought there by a monk called Mahinda, who was the son of the king Ashoka. And when the monk Mahinda, he was in Arhat, he came together with a group of monks. And when they first arrived at the royal capital, the king and the people, they were wondering, who are these strange people who have arrived in our island? They had never seen Buddhist monks before with shaved heads, with saffron robes, walking in a very strange way. And they thought, are these human beings or beings from another planet? And so when finally they learned that these were disciples of a teacher, a religious teacher in India, then in order to explain to the king and the people what their mode of life was, the monk Mahinda taught them this shorter discourse on the simile of the elephant's footprint. Okay, in the sutta it opens with a very nice dramatic scene. Might be taken from, gives us a sort of nice picture of the day-to-day life in India at that period. It's like an upper level life. Here this takes place when the Buddha is living in Jeta's Grove, near the town of Savatthi. This is the park given by his supporter Anathapindika. And at that time there was a Brahmin whose name was Janusoni. This Brahmin Janusoni, he was the advisor, the spiritual advisor to King Pasenadi. He was called the Purohita, that's like the chaplain or religious minister of the king. And he was very wealthy and a very highly esteemed Brahmin. And so he had this, maybe a way of showing off his high status, he had this all-white chariot drawn by white horses, white mares. And it's midday, and he is driving out of Savatthi in his chariot with the white mares. And he sees a wanderer, whom he must know from previous occasions, named Pilotika, coming in the opposite direction, and they meet, and he asks him. He refers to him by his clan name, Vachayana. Apparently that's a Brahmin name. Where are you coming from in the middle of the day? And he says, I am coming from the presence of the Samana Gotama, the ascetic Gotama. And Janusoni must have heard reports already of the Buddha. In fact, he might have even visited the Buddha. But he just wants to get the opinion of this wanderer Pilotika, what he thinks of the Buddha. Of course, maybe he doesn't trust his own judgment, and he thinks the other wanderers, they must be able to evaluate another person's wisdom more accurately than himself. So he says, what do you think of this ascetic Gotama's wisdom? Do you consider him a wise man? And Pilotika says, who am I to be able to judge the ascetic Gautama's lucidity of wisdom. One would surely have to be his equal to know the ascetic Gautama's lucidity of wisdom. Then Janusoni says, "You are certainly praising the ascetic Gautama with high praise indeed." And then Pilotika says, "Who am I to praise the ascetic Gautama? The ascetic Gautama is praised by those who are praised as best among gods and humans." So apparently this wanderer Pilotika must have met the Buddha, had discussions with him, and been extremely impressed by his wisdom, by his demeanor, as well as by all of the reports he had heard from him. Okay, so now the Brahmin Janusoni asks Pilotika, what are your reasons for having such firm confidence in the ascetic Gautama? And now Pilotika, the wanderer Pilotika, gives a simile. He says, "Suppose a wise elephant woodsman were to enter an elephant wood and were to see in the elephant wood a big elephant's footprint, long in extent and broad across. He would come to the conclusion, indeed, this is a big bull elephant." Do any of you have experience seeing elephant's footprints in the ground? I once entered an elephant wood. And I was very afraid. And sometimes you do see the elephants, you see them in the distance. Yeah, you see them. Yeah. Very big. And when you see the big footprints of not only the footprints, but you see other traces of elephants that they leave on the ground. Okay, so now he says, he's now applying the simile, that he saw 4 footprints. Like when you see 1 footprint of the elephant, it's not enough. But when you see 4 footprints of the elephant, then you can come to the conclusion that there's really an elephant there. And so now he says, I saw 4 footprints of the ascetic, of the recluse Gautama. And so I came to the conclusion that he is the blessed one, that he's fully enlightened, that his teaching, the Dhamma, is well proclaimed, and that the Sangha, his order, is practicing the good way. These are like stock formulas for praising the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha. Okay, now what are these 4 elephant footprints? Now you see, in India in this time, all of the different religious teachers and religious seekers, they formed into different companies, and they would travel around, meet each other, and they would engage in debate. And when a religious teacher would come to a town, to a village, then those who were very knowledgeable about the teachings of others, they would all come to listen to his teaching, sometimes not just to learn what he has to say, but they would like to debate with him. And so when they hear that he's coming, then they would try to ask trick questions or trap questions in order to catch him in a dilemma, to push him into a dilemma and embarrass him in public. Okay, so now there were certain learned nobles, these are aristocrats, who were clever, very learned, knowledgeable about the doctrines of others, as sharp as hair-splitting marksmen. Hair-splitting marksmen, they go shooting animals, or they go shooting targets, that they could hit any kind of target with their arrow. And so these go about demolishing the views of others with the text actually here is translated with their sharp wits, but the Pali is panya, with their prajna. But this is not the real higher wisdom, but this is clever intelligence. And so some of them, they would hear that the recluse Gautama will come to visit this village or this town, a village or town near the place where they are living. And so they think, now this famous religious teacher is coming. We've already destroyed the doctrines of so many other teachers. This one will be an easy one to knock over. We'll go to him. They've maybe heard some reports about his teaching. So we'll formulate a question like this. Then they sort of map out their strategy. It's a little bit like playing chess. You have to figure out, I'll move here, then my opponent will move there, then I'll move here, he'll move there, then I get him checkmate. Okay, so they think, if he's asked like this, he'll answer like this, and then we'll refute his doctrine in this way. But if he is asked like that, then he'll answer in that way, and so we'll refute his doctrine in that way. So either way, they'll get him, they'll trap him. And then refute his doctrine, he's embarrassed in public, his following falls away, and they go home proud, happy. They've knocked down another religious teacher. And so then they hear that the Buddha has come to such and such a village or town. They go to listen to him. And so the Buddha is teaching, giving a discourse. And as the Buddha is speaking, they have the question in mind. But the Buddha is speaking, and they're getting interested. And the Buddha is maybe using similes, analogies, giving very inspiring talk, maybe including some very elevating verses. And before long, they're not even interested in their questions anymore, but they really become absorbed in his discourse. They're listening. And at the end of the discourse, what do? They come up to the Buddha and they say, "Venerable Sir, we want to become your disciples." And so they give up their previous allegiance to the other teachings they might have been following, and then they become followers of the Buddha. They become lay disciples of the Buddha, most of them. Okay, so that is the first footprint of the recluse Gautama. Then the second footprint is that there are the first footprint are these are the nobles, the kshatriyas, the princes or aristocrats. The second footprint are the learned Brahmins. These are the ones who are learned in the Vedas, the scriptures, but they hold to the orthodoxy that the Vedas are the revealed truth, the divine truth. And so when they hear that the Buddha doesn't accept the authority of the Vedas, they think that he is a heretic, a nihilist, an atheist. And so they go to him in order to refute him. But again, when they hear that the Buddha speaks about morality, virtue, the higher life, the brahmacharya, the spiritual life, then they start listening. And then the Buddha will speak to them about even teaching them the way to realize Brahma through the practice of the Brahma Viharas. the meditations on universal love, compassion, altruistic joy, equanimity. So the Brahmins start listening and become interested, and they become his disciples. And then there are the learned householders. They hear that the Buddha is teaching this religious life, that calling people to go forth into the homeless life, to give up the household life. And they see many of their young men, young women going forth, becoming monks and nuns. And maybe they go to him in order to argue with him. Say, how can you teach such a destructive doctrine? If everybody becomes monks, everybody becomes nuns, what's going to happen to the human race? No more, no more humanity. The world will be empty. And so they go to hear the Buddha, and then the Buddha gives them a discourse about how to lead the righteous household life, the 5 precepts, the 10 ways of wholesome action, how the parents should bring up the children, how children should look after the parents. And so they get impressed. They give up their arguments and they become his disciples. And then there are the learned ascetics, the recluses. They think that they have the path to enlightenment and that the Buddha is teaching a false path. Some of them think that they are arhats, or liberated ones. And so when they go to hear the Buddha teach, then the Buddha gives them a discourse about the higher religious life, the life of renunciation, of contemplation, of meditation, of wisdom, of liberation. And when they hear this discourse, then they also become disciples of the Buddha. And then they become monastic disciples. They go forth under the Buddha, and then before long they practice according to the Buddha's instructions, and then before long they achieve the final goal of the holy life. And they become, and then after that they say, now I'm reading from the text, paragraph 7, after they achieve this final goal for themselves, they say, we were very nearly lost. We very nearly perished. Formerly, we claimed that we were recluses, we were summoners, ascetics, but we were not really ascetics. We claimed that we were Brahmins in the sense of being spiritual, holy men, but we were not really holy men. We claimed that we were arahants, but we were not really arahants. They were living in delusion about their attainment. But now, they say, now we are recluses. Now we are Brahmins. Now we are arahants. When I saw this 4th footprint of the recluse Gautama, I came to the conclusion that the Blessed One is fully enlightened. And so then he concludes, he says, when I saw these 4 footprints of the recluse Gautama, I came to the conclusion the Blessed One is fully enlightened, the Dhamma is well proclaimed by the Blessed One, the Sangha is practicing the good way. Okay, that's all the explanation of that wanderer Pilotika, explaining why he has this confidence in the Buddha. And now when this was said, then the Brahman Janusoni, now he himself has been sort of won over by this report. And so as a mark of humility and a sign of his own growing trust and devotion to the Buddha, he gets out from his all-white chariot drawn by white mares. He rearranges his robe. This is a special sign of respect. So he puts it all up on one shoulder, and then he holds out his hands in the Anjali, the joined hands. Hujang, I think. And so he holds out his hands in reverential salutation towards the Jeta's grove, and he says 3 times, he says, Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Honor to the Blessed One, accomplished and fully enlightened. Honor to the Blessed One, accomplished and fully enlightened. Honor to the Blessed One, accomplished and fully enlightened. Perhaps sometime or other, we means I, is the polite way of saying I, might meet Master Gautama and have some conversation with him. Okay, that is sort of, we call this the dramatic prelude to the sutta. But now we come to the essence of the sutta, the actual text of the sutta. That I will leave for next time, hoping that we won't get any snow. Okay, any questions on this? So there's nothing really problematic in it. Yeah, this is a convention it's even used in English, not so much nowadays, but in earlier centuries. It's a polite way of speaking. There's an expression for it, we call it the editorial we. In Chinese too, you have that. So why are you asking when? In Taiwanese. Probably in mainland also. Woman, yeah. Yeah, I don't know, maybe it's just a natural instinct sort of not to focus too much attention on the I, the individual. Like even, they also call it in England they call it the royal, it's called the royal I. Yeah, the royal I, like the king or queen makes the decree. We declare that everybody must do such and such on such and such a day. But who is this we? It's only the king or the queen. Okay, so we will stop. And please, next time, there were handouts today of material that I'll discuss next week. Oh, we do the sharing of the merits. Akasata Cūḻahatthipadopama Devanaga Mahedika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Sasanan Akasata Cūḻahatthipadopama Devanaga Mahedika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Desanan Akasata Cūḻahatthipadopama Devanaga Mahedika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Manparam Etavata Amehi Sampadang Punya Sampadang Sabbe Deva Anumodantu Sabba Sampati Siddhya Etavata Amehi Sampadang Punya Sampadang Sabbe Bhuta Anumodantu Sabba Sampati Siddhya